walked a black boy who looked like he didn't belong. His clothes were ripped, shoes torn, hair wild and matted. A dusty backpack clung to his shoulder, and his eyes, though tired, held a quiet intensity. This was James, 20 years old, alone and seemingly lost. People glanced at him and quickly looked away. To them, he was just another drifter, maybe homeless, maybe trouble. No one cared enough to wonder. But James was not what he appeared to be. Inside that dusty backpack was a transmitter. On his wrist, hidden under the fraying sleeve, a tactical watch linked directly to a military satellite. And under that calm, tired face was one of the youngest operatives in the Special Intelligence Division, a man on a mission. As he walked, his eyes swept the street. The alley to his right, the storefront with tinted windows, the man in a gray coat who'd been standing too long at the bus stop. Every detail mattered. He whispered softly, his voice barely audible beneath the city's hum. Target vicinity confirmed. But the world didn't see a soldier. They saw a beggar. And that misunderstanding would soon explode into a moment that would change everything. A patrol car crawled down the road, the afternoon sun bouncing off its hood. Inside sat Sergeant Davis and Officer Miller, two men whose badges had long stopped being symbols of service and had become tools of control. "Look over there," Miller grunted, pointing toward James. "Another street rat loitering around." Davis sighed, half amused. "Can't take 5 steps in the city without tripping over one. Let's move him along." The car stopped abruptly. Doors slammed. Authority hit the pavement. "Hey!" Miller barked as they approached. "You. Yeah, you. What are you doing here?" James turned, calm and composed. "Just walking," he replied quietly. "Just walking." Davis scoffed. "You look like you're casing the place. What's in the bag?" "Just some things," James said. "I'm not causing any trouble." But they weren't listening. They didn't care. His clothes told them everything they thought they needed to know. "Hands where I can see 'em," Miller ordered, stepping closer. "Empty your pockets." James stayed still. "I haven't done anything wrong, officer." Davis smirked. "You can explain that downtown." Before James could speak again, Miller grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back. Davis shoved him toward the patrol car. "Hey!" a woman shouted from across the street. "He's just standing there." "Mind your business," Davis snapped. Within seconds, James was cuffed, shoved into the back seat, and driven away. The mission compromised, the operation in jeopardy, and his dignity stripped on the side of the road. The city blurred by through the scratched window of the patrol car. James sat silently, his hands bound, his jaw clenched. He had been in tighter situations before, ambushes, high-risk extractions, but this felt different. This wasn't an enemy. This was supposed to be protection. Miller glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "You know, kid, you picked the wrong neighborhood to loiter in." James said nothing. "Not gonna talk?" Davis taunted. "Figures. Probably got a record a mile long." "I haven't broken any laws," James replied calmly. "You're making a mistake." Miller laughed. "Mistake? No, son. You made the mistake, thinking you could hang around and not get noticed." James sighed. "You have no idea who I am." Davis grinned. Yeah, they all say that. But this time it wasn't a bluff. As the sirens echoed down the avenue, James stared out the window and whispered to himself, "Control your temper. Mission first." But deep down, frustration burned. Not for himself, but for what this ignorance could cost. His operation depended on him staying invisible. And now, invisibility was gone. The precinct smelled of stale coffee and arrogance. James was fingerprinted, photographed, and shoved into a cold interrogation room. Officers passed by, laughing at his appearance. "Another junkie," one said. "Street trash," muttered another. Miller leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "All right, kid. Let's make this easy. Who are you? Where's your ID?" I told you, James said evenly. I'm not a criminal. No ID, no story, Davis snapped. You're staying here until we figure out who you are. James exhaled. You're interfering with something bigger than you realize. Davis chuckled. Oh yeah? And what's that? Your next panhandling shift. The hours dragged on. Questions.
Accusation.
Insults. But James remained composed. Losing control would solve nothing. At one point, Miller leaned in close. You know what your problem is? You people think you can walk around like you own the place. But not here. Here, we're in charge. James locked eyes with him. No, officer. You just think you are. It happened by accident. During a final search of James's belongings, Davis reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small leather wallet. He flipped it open and froze. Staring back at him was a United States military intelligence ID. The badge shimmered under the fluorescent lights. Below James's photo was a line of text that made Davis's throat tighten. Special Operations Division, Top Secret Clearance. Miller walked over. What's that? Davis's voice trembled. It's real. James stood. I told you, you don't know who I am. The room fell silent. Miller's face turned pale. Davis stumbled backward. Oh my God, Miller whispered. We arrested a federal agent. The door burst open as the precinct captain entered. Confusion on his face. What the hell is going on here? James turned to him, his voice calm but cold. Your officers unlawfully detained a member of military intelligence during an active operation. And in doing so, they may have compromised national security. The captain's eyes widened. Dear Lord, the fallout was swift. Within hours, senior officials arrived at the station. Apologies were offered. Explanations were attempted. But the damage was done. Miller and Davis were suspended on the spot. An internal investigation began immediately. And James? He walked out of that precinct without handcuffs, but with a new mission, to make sure this never happened again. 2 weeks later, a disciplinary board convened. Miller and Davis stood in front of a panel of stone-faced officials. You failed to follow procedure, one investigator said. You detained a citizen without probable cause. And worse, you arrested a decorated agent of the United States military. Miller's voice cracked. We didn't know. That's the point, the investigator replied. You didn't care to know. The verdict, termination, effective immediately. Their badges were taken. Their service weapons removed. Their careers ended not because of who James was, but because of who they had chosen to be. The incident exploded online. Cell phone footage of the arrest spread across social media. News headlines read, Undercover soldier arrested as beggar. Police detain military agent by mistake. Debates raged on television panels. Experts discussed implicit bias, profiling, and the dangers of judging by appearance. James's name was never officially released, but his story was everywhere. Through it all, James remained silent. He returned to duty, continued his mission, and avoided interviews. But deep inside, he knew something had shifted, not just for him, but for countless others who had been dismissed, underestimated, and mistreated simply because of how they looked. Weeks later, James stood once again on the same street where it had all begun. This time, his posture was different, confident, composed, unapologetic. People still glanced at him and looked away, but now he smiled. A fellow agent joined him. Does it still bother you? James shook his head.
No.
It taught me something. What's that? That people are quick to see a beggar but slow to see a soldier. But that's their failure, not mine. He looked toward the city skyline, glowing under the setting sun. And maybe, he added, stories like this remind the world that strength doesn't always wear a uniform, and heroes don't always look the part. And so, the boy they called a beggar turned out to be a guardian. The suspect they mocked turned out to be a soldier. And the day they arrested James, they arrested their own prejudice. Remember this story because the next time you judge someone by their appearance, you might be looking at a hero. Every story matters. Your support keeps them alive. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.